the first of our presenters, who is Aubrey Edwards, who is a youth advocate and a healing-centered, trauma-informed arts educator. She has worked with young people and co-created space in an array of capacities for over 20 years. She loves using her background in collaborative anthropology to connect organizations, policymakers, artists, and teachers in jointly amplifying youth voice. Welcome.
Awesome, great. Oh, thank you for the light, Deb. Okay, wonderful. So how do we envision our communities? What do we want for them? And how can we incorporate youth voice, youth vision, and youth wisdom in this process? So this was a video of a standing ovation. So I'll let you just kind of close your eyes and imagine a conference room of 500 adults standing up to give an ovation for young people who presented at the Partners for Rural Impact Summit earlier this month in Charlotte. Those young people were from South Louisiana, Owsley County, Kentucky, and Laramie, Wyoming. So from that standing ovation, let's talk a little bit more about this conference. There it is, don't worry. Wonderful. So this was a project that was funded by the Omidyar Foundation, and that's a foundation that specifically reimagines and re-envisions rural economies. So we have these three groups of young people that presented at this conference. This work had been done over about 6 months. You can read a little bit about the conference here, a little bit about the plenary where these young people presented. So what were they presenting to these adults? So we had three groups, three different cohorts that came together. Teaching artists, we had all been in community for many decades, so we were able to connect pretty easily. In South Louisiana, we had Monique Verdun, who's a visual artist and a representative of the Houma Nation. She was working with young people through the swamps there. In Owsley County, Kentucky, we had Bob Martin, who is a theater artist. He's been working in that community for about 15 years. And here in Laramie, I'm a visual anthropologist and artist, and I had the privilege of working with some young people here. And I think as we first started this program, when we first started digging into our rural economies, there's something very interesting that we saw that was a connective tissue between these three places. Can y'all guess what those economies might be? You got it. So as we started this process, right, these three different groups working respectively in their own regions, we started this process of creating on these three prompts. What matters about this place? How do you represent this place, or how have you experienced being representative of this place? And what is your 10-year vision for yourself and this place? And how are they tied together? And I have to note that young people, when you ask them a 10-year vision for their home, it's really challenging and difficult for them to think about that. So tying it together in a vision for themselves was a really helpful tool for them. So we met every week in our respective cohorts, and every month we came together in a Zoom group where all three groups kind of talked about how they've been approaching these topics. And we grounded with this poem. Is anybody familiar with this poem by Georgia Ellen Lyon? So we grounded our work together through this initial lens of thinking about what home is, where you're from, what you love or hate about your place, what it feels like, and why it matters. And we're going to come back to this. So I want y'all to think about where you come from, the culture, the foodways, the music, the rituals, because I am going to ask you to share here in just a second. So this is Owsley County, Kentucky. This is a one-stop sign town. The work the young people were doing there had to do with the history of moonshining in their region, the broken promises of their leaders and people in positions of power, and how there's been a drastic decline in their population. One of the young people I worked with said, man, I just can't wait for a Walmart to be here. This is South Louisiana. This is a place that loses, the current statistic, they lose over a football field of land every 30 minutes due to rising sea levels, subsidence, and pipelines. So these young people were exploring what it means to live with water and what it means to convince government agencies that your home is worth saving. And here in Laramie, a place that you know, we explored our history and in particular, events that have laid the groundwork for how we navigate our landscape and our home today. So I worked with 6 young people who I've been working with for over a year in various capacities. They are incredible leaders of their community. We're going to have a couple of them here on the panel later today. And we worked within the framework of past, present, and future. What is an event? Something that happened in Laramie in their home that has affected how they navigate their community today? And how do they envision their communities in the future? So, for example, that top line says juvenile justice. So the young folks chose their own research topics. They wanted to explore juvenile justice. We have one of the highest incarceration rates of young people in the country. The murder of Matthew Shepard, education, punk and goth history, it's pretty cool. Sacred indigenous sites and Mexican American history here. So working within these areas of research, young people kind of dug into that lens of past, present, and future. So for example, how do we navigate the horrific murder of Matthew Shepard? How do we continue to make sure our queer and trans community members are safe today? And how do we achieve a community free of discrimination, personal and political, in our future? And these young folks started making a documentary film around all their areas of research. So, after working for months in our respective rural areas, we came together. And this was earlier this month in April. We traveled to Charlotte and we met the other groups that we've been working with from afar. And there was a lot of firsts. Young people flying for the first time, and y'all, that trip from Laramie to Denver, woo, it was rough. Seeing a skyline for the first time, riding a train for a first time, and there was even a first kiss. It was really sweet. So we all descended in Charlotte together, and then we started the process of preparing for the conference. Has anybody heard the word devising before? Okay, so anyone know theater people in here? So devising is when you get a whole bunch of different folks together, you put them in the room, and we spend a full day figuring out what we're going to do together. So these young people were bringing all their research, their art making, their respective lived experiences in their own homes in these rural communities. And we got together and figured out, how do we take all this really incredible work that you've done, and how do we put this together as one presentation for a group of 500 adults? And the devising process has many activities, trying to find those common themes. So listening activities, engaging activities, getting to know each other, moving your body around the space. So we did that for a full day, working to weave in our stories together. And here you can see some of our whiteboards, right? We had a room of maybe 35 young people with some supporting adults. And so we were there to support them, provide the platforms as they figured out what they wanted to present to this wider audience. So I want to share one of the exercises with you that we did and how we kind of started together. So where I'm from, right? So I come from New Orleans. So I come from, or rather where I'm from, is alligator-filled swamps and Mardi Gras. Where are you from? Yeah, what's something cultural, ritual? What's something that you could share about that place? Rodeo. I come from rodeo. and hard work. Yeah. Trey, what about you? Where do you come from?
I'm an Air Force brat, so everywhere, but I would say I come from community.
I come from
All
community.
those bases, we take care of each other.
I love that. We come from a place where we take care of each other. Sean, where do you come from?
Come from windswept
Oh.
parking lots.
I come from the windswept parking lots. So I want you all to start imagining a room full of young people and how they're sharing the places that they come from. Thank you for sharing with us today. Now, I think it's really important to note, this was a space for young people to truly be in a leadership role and to be leaders, right? They are representatives of their place. I had one young person, she was just crying in the corner before we presented, and she's like, I just want to make sure people understand what Wyoming is. Like, I want to make sure I share that with them. So they took their role as representatives very, very, very seriously. And I want us to keep thinking about, outside of the space of a conference, how can we make sure young people in our community are leaders and representatives, right? Something for us to keep thinking about. And I think it's worth noting that this conference, the Partners for Rural Impact, which comes from Berea, Kentucky, they do really incredible work. This was a conference where we had over 500 adults gathered to talk about education in rural places. Our young people were the only young people speaking to education in rural places at the conference. So I just want you to think about that. And the swag that they handed out at the conference, the books about reimagining rural economies, there were no voices from young people. Why might that be an issue? So here's the presentation. I do have it on the computer over here as well. If you'd like to see some of it during the break. Again, standing ovation. And I think what was beautiful about this, who's scared of standing in front of people? Yeah, so were a lot of young people. So this took a lot of courage, a lot of confidence. I was able to see them transform during this process to build community and connection with other young folks who also feel quite isolated at times. And they were able to come together to explore similar challenges and hopes and make friends. So there is a national movement, right, of listening to youth voice and youth vision. I've seen this kind of pick up steam over the past few years of like, wow, we should probably be listening to young people. Sometimes that is ticking a box of, oh, we need a youth council. Yeah, but are you paying them? Are you valuing them? How are their decisions actually being put into practice in your community? So just something, again, for us to think about. How are we truly putting young people in leadership positions and listening to the vision they have for their own communities? So as adults, we are incredibly privileged, right? How are you listening to young people? How are you co-creating spaces with them to be visionaries? And how are you making sure that they are safe and protected in their full, beautiful selves and identities here in Wyoming? So I encourage you to keep thinking about this and how can we make sure that we're taking their vision and enacting it here. Couple quick things before I wrap. All the young people did sign media releases. So we made sure they had ownership over their own photos before I shared them. All the young people involved in this project were paid to be artists, thinkers, and leaders. So we can model, right, equity in our community. And 2 young folks will be at the panel today at 11 to talk about their experiences. So thank you.